Right.
And there's an interesting letter from Einstein to Hilbert. David Hilbert. Any physicist knows who David Hilbert is, because we use his stuff all the time. He invented a lot of the math that physics uses, the basic math.
Mm-hmm.
So we even have a mathematical environment in which we do quantum mechanics, which is called Hilbert space. So his name is all over physics. There's a letter from Einstein to Hilbert saying, I just got this paper. Thanks for sending me your recent paper. There's some of it I don't understand. It uses this math that I'm not quite conversant with yet, and I need this for my work. Please, he says, it would suffice if, as usual, you have Fräulein Noether explain it to me. So this establishes a context where he was used to her explaining all the math that he needed to him, including explaining his own equations and how to deal with them. So without her tutelage, basically, during those 5 months, he would not have reached the result that he reached in November of 1915, which was his finished theory of gravity.
Okay. Wow.
So this is why other people, my editor basically and publisher, thought that would be a good title.
Okay.
And that language is called Julia, for no reason, by the way. The name comes from nowhere. According to them, they just made up the name.
Okay. Julia for
nobody's
the sake of
girlfriend
Julia.
or anything.
Right. Okay. So, thank you for that explanation. So, the other book I saw on Amazon was Einstein's Tutor. What was that?
Okay, so this book. Oh, by the way, no. So this book is coming out in September.
Wow.
But you can pre-order it today, and it makes a great gift for your graduating student. You can pre-order it on Amazon and any online book retailer.
Yes.
And if you might get a cheaper price locked in if you pre-order it today.
Okay, there you go, everybody.
This is what I have is called an advanced reading copy. So it's a paperback version. It'll come out first in hardcover. But this is what we send out to reviewers I'll give one to you.
Thank you.
So that they can start reading it and write reviews or blurbs for the dust jacket without having to wait for the final copy to come out in September.
Okay.
September 10th when it's coming
September 10th, everybody.
So the thing is, it's like 98% of the final version of the book, but without the final level of proofreading. So for a book like this, you have at least 4 levels of editing. The initial editing, and then copy editing, and then 2 or 3 levels of proofreading after that to try to stamp out all the mistakes. There are always mistakes left, but we try to stamp out as many of them.
That's true. Yeah, I'm working on something right now, and it is impossible. You think you got everything, but yeah.
It is impossible to write. The computer book's 500 pages. I don't know where they are, but I know the mistakes.
You know they're there.
And this book, okay, so this is about 300 pages, 323 pages, including the footnotes at the end. And this version, the preliminary version, we went through it 2 more times before the final hardcover, and I found a bunch of mistakes. So this version still has typos, misspellings, incorrect reference numbers.
Yes.
A handful of mistakes like that.
Yes.
But it's 98% okay. So it's good enough for people to read, to write reviews. It's not horrible enough that this book's full of mistakes. It's not. So it's for you.
Thank you, Lee. Well, copy, everybody.
Yeah.
Einstein's Tutor. The story of Emmy Noether,
German,
and the invention of modern physics. So does that mean she preceded Einstein?
Well, she was a contemporary with Einstein. That's why the title, which is a big compromise. But,
okay.
That's why we sometimes like to call her Einstein's tutor, because for 5 months she was actually his tutor. So Emmy Noether was a woman, obviously, in Germany. Was born in 1882, and when she was born into a middle-class family. Her father was a math professor, and she started as a normal person, unusually noticeably intelligent girl. But nobody really cared that she was intelligent because she was a girl. And Germany at the time was actually socially behind most of continental Europe in the status of women. They were still very conservative about women's place.
Mm-hmm.
And she went along the path of a typical person of her class and place in an academic family, which is that she became certified to teach French and English, which is the only acceptable teaching position for a woman. Women were not allowed to be professors or teachers of any other subject, but they were allowed to teach languages to rich people who wanted their kids to learn French.
Yes.
And English. That was acceptable. So she went to the training for that, and she took the certification. She became certified, but she never did it, because before doing that, she realized she just loved mathematics, and she wanted to learn mathematics. But that was not something girls did, even though her father was a math professor. But because her father was a math professor and very highly respected, and had some pull in his university, he sort of helped to convince the other professors to allow her to audit their classes. She could not enroll, not allowed to even matriculate when she started out. But they allowed her to audit the class. So she audited every math class. And after a couple of years, they changed that rule where women were allowed to matriculate. So she could be an official student. She was like one of two students among thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one in the doing math classes, the only one. There was one in the medical school, there was one or two others in the university, and she was the only woman in the math classes. But she was an official student, and in 1907, they actually allowed, I'll leave out some of the details, but in 1907 she actually got a PhD in math. The only woman in Germany to have a PhD in a subject like that. But she was still, in 1907, women were still not allowed to be professors. So here she was with a PhD in math and not allowed to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
But her father at that time had become very frail. He'd had polio when he was younger, and he reached the point where it was almost impossible for him to teach his classes. So, and in order to do his other duties, like grading papers and so on. Basically, he couldn't do all of his job. And so, but she was a mathematician at that point. And she started teaching as his assistant and sometimes teaching in his place, but without pay. He allowed her to do it, and everyone knew her at that point in the department.
Mm-hmm.
So they allowed her to help. So she was teaching without pay for several years, helping her father. And then she spent a semester in Göttingen University, which is a university about 100 miles from our house, where there was the most famous mathematician in the world, David Hilbert, who was the head of that math department. And she spent a semester there auditing his classes, and then she went back to help her dad. And then in 1914, she visited Göttingen again with her dad to work with Hilbert and another mathematician to write the obituary of her thesis advisor, because they all knew each other, so she was qualified. She knew him. So she was writing this, as she was writing this, as they were working together to write this obituary, she was talking to the head of the math department, the famous David Hilbert, about his math. And he realized that she knows everything. She knows everything about my research. She solved one of my unsolved problems. And he and the other, the person who had hired him, Felix Klein, who was like one of the second most famous mathematicians, they realized we have here like one of the top mathematicians in the world that no one knows, who doesn't have a job, and they asked her to come work with them.
Yes.
And at Göttingen, which was the center of math in the world at the time, right? The most famous mathematician in the center of math, and she went there to work with him, but couldn't be hired. Right? So she worked for a couple of years without pay for him. During that time, starting in 1915, during that time, it was a turbulent time for her. Her mother died, or her father died, sorry. and she had to travel back and forth from her hometown to Göttingen, and it took a while to get settled in. But in July 1915, Einstein visited that university at Hilbert's invitation to give a lecture on his new theory of gravity. They wound up giving 6 lectures, spending a whole week there. And meeting Hilbert for the first time, they became incredibly good friends. They were both kind of political renegades. Germany was this was after the World War I got started, the Great War. And Germany was very nationalistic, very militaristic. But Hilbert and Einstein were disgusted by all this militarism in their home country.
Yes.
And when they discovered each other and that they were of like mind, they became very good friends because they realized they shared a political outlook. They were against militarism, against nationalism, against Germany's desire to take over the territory of other countries. Very dangerous positions to hold in Germany in 1915, but they agreed with each other. So Einstein was really happy to meet someone like this, who also understood all of the math he was trying to do, who understood the theory of gravity that he was trying to invent, that we now call the general theory of relativity, right? Which at the time he hadn't been able to get to work. Right? So this was July of 1915, and he was laboring to get his equations to, I won't go into details, but to get them to all work together.
Yes.
In the proper mathematical way, and he couldn't do it. And he had almost given up. But when he visited these mathematicians at Göttingen, especially Hilbert and Felix Klein, they sort of encouraged him. They said, we think this can work. You just have to keep working on it. I mean, we think your ideas make sense. And he was sort of reinvigorated after that visit, and he went back to Berlin, where he was teaching at the time. And really just reinvigorated and started working hard on it. But he needed their help. He couldn't do it himself. A lot of this was recently developed mathematics, and even many mathematicians didn't understand it, right? But it was the mathematical language that he needed to describe basically calculus on a curved space-time.
Yeah.
Right. And it was not. Hilbert knew a lot of it, but he wound up paradoxically teaching the mathematicians some of this new math, this tensor calculus, it's called, because it wasn't yet a standard part of the mathematics curriculum, and it was like at the research level of mathematics. It was the math that he needed, though, this calculus on manifolds, this tensor calculus. He needed this. But it was hard, and he couldn't do it himself. So he went back, he couldn't get the calculators to do it. He started writing letters back to Hilbert, Felix Klein, and Emmy Noether. And if you read all these letters, this picture emerges. The picture that emerges is that for the 5 months, from July to November of 1915, Emmy Noether, explained to him how to make his equations work. Even though his correspondence was among basically those 3 people, Einstein, Noether, David Hilbert, and Felix Klein, there are a lot of very obvious clues in the letters that show that it was Emmy Noether's explanation that either was offered directly to him in her postcards and letters, most of which don't survive. So you have to take the clues that exist. And occasionally a letter directly from Hilbert, and a bunch of letters directly from Felix Klein. But Felix Klein in other letters remarked that when he writes to Einstein, he's just relaying what Emmy Noether explained to him. So it's all her explanation, either directly from her to Einstein or through Felix Klein.
Right.
And there's an interesting letter from Einstein to Hilbert, David Hilbert. Any physicist knows who David Hilbert is, because we use his stuff all the time. He invented a lot of the math that physics uses, the basic math. So we even have a mathematical environment in which we do quantum mechanics, which is called Hilbert space. So his name is all over physics. There's a letter from Einstein to Hilbert saying, I just got this paper, thanks for sending me your recent paper. There's some of it I don't understand. It uses this math that I'm not quite conversant with yet. And I need this for my work. please, oh, he says, it would suffice if, as usual, you have Fraulein Noether explain it to me. So this establishes a context where he was used to her explaining all the math that he needed to him, including explaining his own equations and how to deal with them. So without her tutelage, basically, during those 5 months, he would not have reached the result that he reached in November of 1915, which was his finished theory of gravity.
Okay. Wow.
So this is why we say, this is why other people, my editor basically and publisher, thought that would be a good title for the book.
Okay.
But it's only 5 months out of a long life where she was his tutor, but that was the essential ingredient that he needed to finish his work.
Okay. Well, yeah, Lee, I look forward to reading this. Yeah, it sounds very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you hear the name Einstein all the time, but you don't know who all he worked with or even who contributed to his success. Okay. Well, Lee, that's all I've got. So you're spending your retirement years doing some traveling, doing some writing.
I like traveling.
Thank you for watching this discussion. It will be continued in subsequent installments. Please leave any questions or comments in the comments section below. And finally, please like, share, and subscribe, especially if you are new.